You know, if you look at the breakdown of the budget, you know, you'll see that, you know, under equipment, you know, $8,000. I mean, and sometimes, granted, we'll go $100 over that, but we'll come, you know, it'll balance out because we won't spend out, you know, so much money in uniforms that year. But that being said, $8,000 is pretty meager. You know, when you consider our call volume and, you know, the involvement of the calls that we have. Do we ask for more? No. You know, our budget has been, aside from personal services cost increases with, you know, 2% here, 2% there, we've been very, very conservative in our expenditures and our requests. So, and when you make comparisons or you look around and consider our revenue less our expenditure, you would see that the ambulance service really isn't that big of a nut to swallow when you look at, you know, the total amount.
Well, I feel like that's a lot of information.
It's a whole lot of information.
I appreciate that you have it, and I appreciate receiving it. It does seem to me that there are a lot of options, and maybe this is something I think that, again, each year, as we get to the budget time, we think of things. So over the coming months, maybe we could look at some of those other options and of ways of structuring things so that we save money on something. And maybe it's not this, but this is one of the things that continually has a shortfall. If some of the other areas are locked in, then even if this is uncomfortable, this is a place, you know, I'd like to see zero budget balanced budget, that where the income and the expenses balance each other out. And if we don't have more income, then we have to cut something so that we don't have expenses.
All right, let me back up.
That cause tax increases.
Zero budget. Again, I'll explain that. At the end of this year, after $2.3 million being spent, we will be within $45,000 of expenditures. That's how close we are to zero. If we're at zero, we will have nothing to carry over the following year. So it'll therefore be all on taxes. So if the state comes down and says, okay, sorry, retirement didn't do so hot this year, you've got an 18% increase in your retirement fund, you've got to raise $20,000. That $20,000 more than likely will go directly to the tax base. And it'll fluctuate wildly, depending on what the services are that we have and the things that we need to provide for employees or for the town for its own protection.
But that will be in addition to the 3 to 4% increase that you've built into the budget. So I don't think that's really relevant to the question of what you put.
There's no 3 to 4, that's what I'm saying. We're pretty much right on the numbers.
For the past year.
For this past year.
Yeah, I'm talking about the budget that you put in front of us.
This year, okay, so again, there's comparative budgets. And we put out a comparative budget last year, and I'm sorry if Joyce put out the standard budget, because it should have been a comparative budget showing the line items. But a lot of departments are dropped. We have less, I mean, I'll go right through it. Department by department. We had 0% increase on town board, 0.65% increase on justice, and that's 2% raise for the secretary in the Justice Department. We had a 0.36 reduction in supervisor budget. We had a 2.25% reduction in assessor's office, a 0.89% increase in the town clerk's office, again due to 2% for deputy clerks. We had a 3.39% increase because I rounded up the attorney's cost, which is right about, again, we're probably going to hit about $36,000 for this year. Elections cost, we did not change, as I explained, you know, until I see the legislature go, I'm not going to take that 7 out of it. The records management cost, there was no request for an increase, but they still have to do a lot of microfiching, which is going to cost some money to get that transfer. Maintenance building services, again, it's an increase of 2% for the worker, which translates to a 0.17% increase for maintenance of the buildings and diesel and gas. We had 0% in mail. 5.6% increase on insurance, which was explained back in June when we did a 6-month policy, that because of claims, we're probably looking at a more expensive policy around $80,000. Those numbers are starting to come in. We're going to be below that, but again, I'm not going to change it for the sake of $2,000 or $3,000 to save our budget. You had a 0.75% decrease in the police budget. A 1.58% increase in the dog's personal services, but mostly due to the 2% increase for the employees. A 1.74% increase for ambulance due to the 2% increase for the employees. A 0.7% increase in the highway for the secretary's 2% increase. Town electric, 8.33%. I can't control election costs, that's where they're coming in. Welfare personal services is $1,000 last year, 0% this year, which is a 100% reduction in that cost. We'll go through publicity is 0% increase. Veterans is a 0% increase. Program for the aging and the senior nutrition program is 0% increase. Recreation personal services is an increase of 2.7% total, but again, mostly due to $1,000 we had to add to that contractual line for the employees working in the recreation department. 0% increase in community improvement, 0% in the library improvements, 1.2% increase for the museum due to the 2% for the museum curator, a 0.7% reduction in the zoning officer or zoning office department because of a change in personnel by the secretary, which receives a lower salary. We have a 15.08% increase in refuse recycling, which is akin to what was going on with the RRA. 0% for planning and management, and overall a 4.4% reduction in employee costs, in employee retirement, social security, all that. We have a 3% reduction in the installment debt principal for the payback of an ambulance, and we have a 50% increase for the capital reserve project, which basically translates of the $2,500 that came out of the previous line goes into there, so it's a wash. We have a 73.3% decrease in county social services, so overall, our spending plan is down 1.46% from the previous year. Last year's budget called for $2,360,000 roughly to be spent. We're proposing $2,325,000, so it's a reduction of $35,000 in expenditures. I don't know where else we can find money.
Well, I appreciate you going through it, and it does look like the ambulance services and maybe electric are the only two areas that you went through where you've had big increases, or at least you had a big expense that has been stable over time with the ambulance, where there may be some ways to save the taxpayers some money. And if we don't have the income coming in, then it seems like we have to put some extra work into that.
And we will be doing more due diligence on ways to increase the revenues as well as trying to get more efficiency out of the department as best we can.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions on budget?
I have one other question on the budget,
Yes.
if no one else does. For the review of the proposed Bel Air project,
Yes.
Crossroads project, do you have a way to pay for the consultant for the planning board? And if so, is it reflected somewhere in this document?
No, it's a $40,000 escrow account that has been given to the town and has been billed out through that escrow account.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that? We're running a little late here, I know we got it. So with that, I'd like to entertain a motion to close the public hearing on the budget. So moved. Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. With that, I'd like to open up the public hearing for the logging permit for Bergen County Sportsmen's Association. Again, this is a 480A forestry program. They've done this before a number of years ago. They did this. And I've already contacted the logger. And it's here.
I'm not the logger, I'm the forester for branch 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did contact Rod today.
Yes, Rod Jones.
Okay. Are you up?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
We passed in the hall.
Yep.
Anyway, I did contact him today, and talking with Eric and knowing Rose Mountain Road, his concern is about, going into maybe the thaw seasons, be it January or March or anything like that, and we're just going to request a minimum $20,000 bond provided by your company for the logging permit, and just for the protection of the road and keep it maintained.
So if the logging wasn't done between January and March, was done during a dry period of the year?
I'm going to say that we're going to require that regardless.
It just seems like a lot. So what I would like to do is have Dutchess Lumber Company, they're actually the harvesters from Portland, New York, contact him and figure out some way to satisfy whatever his concerns are that way.
All right,
Whether it's a bonding company or an insurance
Again, we
bond
don't
or
anticipate,
something?
we've seen this before, we've done this before, never had an issue with any longer.
Okay.
So, but it's just for our own town's protection for the roads.
I don't represent Gutchess, so the titles are, to the trees have already passed to Gutchess.
Okay.
And so they're responsible for the harvesting and meeting the needs of the town. But I talked to them this morning, and they said that, who is the supervisor? You, or you, I mean, so I didn't mean that. I should have said the highway superintendent.
Eric Hoffman.
Okay, thank you.
His number is 688-9901.
Thank you.
So with that, we entertain comments from the public. So, town board.
So do we need this to pass the resolution then? Do we need the commitment to the 20,000 bond?
Yeah, we're gonna add that to the resolution, and once we receive that, we can move forward.
And your name is Rob Jones?
Rodney.
Rodney Jones.
So with that, I'd just like to, we'll finish up, we'll do the secret now. I'll go through the 11 questions they have here. And if you disagree, please say nay. Well, kind of, you're supposed to say no. Just say you disagree. Will the proposed action create a material conflict with an adopted land use plan or zoning regulation? No. Will the proposed action result in change in the use or intensity of the use of the land? No. Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of the existing community? No. Will the proposed action have an impact on environmental characteristics that cause the establishment of a critical environmental area? No. Will the proposed action result in an adverse change in the existing level of traffic or affecting existing infrastructure for mass transit, biking, or walkway? No. Will the proposed action cause an increase in the use of energy and it fails to incorporate reasonably available energy conservation or renewable energy opportunities? No. Will the proposed action impact existing public and private water supplies or public and private wastewater treatment facilities? No one vote. Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of important historic, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources? No. Will the proposed action result in an adverse change to natural resources, wetlands, water bodies, groundwater, air quality, flora, and fauna? No. Will the proposed action result in an increase in the potential for erosion, flooding, or drainage problems? No. And will the proposed action create a hazard to environmental resources or human health? No. Is the board in agreement with these statements?
Yes.
Okay. Based on this, I'd say we'll do that on the resolution. That's where we make the neg down. With that, if there's any other comments, public comments on the logging permit? I entertain a motion that we close the public hearing for the logging permit. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Take 5 minutes to get a drink of water. I have something for you to say.
Okay.
Here's dry. What you got to do is secret. So I just transfer it.
We'll be back at 7 o'clock.
Hey, listen.